Good morning, everyone. This is Ameen and today I will be presenting my PowerPoint about methods of satisfying human needs. According to our modern understanding on human psychology, we have reached to the understanding that the major component in each of our lives is to fulfill all of our needs to reach the self-actualization level that Maslow has talked about. This is because we always feel this satisfaction when we fulfill one of our needs, along with this pleasure and fulfillment. To reach this high level of peace with oneself and reach the level of self actualization, one must use direct methods to achieve these goals. However, it is not always that we are able to meet those needs for various reasons, sometimes out of our control and sometimes in our control. So therefore, we use indirect methods to satisfy. These direct methods include four most important methods, which are hard work, realistic goals, situation evaluation, and cooperation with others. Now I'll be talking about an example of direct methods at work and how someone can use them to achieve his needs or goals. So in this example, I'll be talking about a young investor who has lost a lot of money and needs to deal with this problem as soon as possible and in the most efficient way to achieve his need for wealth. This investor needs to use direct methods, which are the four that we have mentioned in the previous slide. First of all, he needs to work hard by researching the stocks he is investing in and the history of these stocks. He shouldn't just trust whatever the brokers tell him. Second of all, he needs to set realistic goals for himself so that he doesn't set himself to become a millionaire within a few months and then feel hopeless when he doesn't reach to that goal. Third of all, he needs to evaluate the situation and how it progresses every step of the way so that he knows when he can start investing in maybe larger, higher risk stocks with a higher reward, of course, but still without rushing things. And then finally, he needs to cooperate with others and form relations with them so that he can become a higher figure in the investing industry and can achieve hopefully his need for wealth. We have some indirect methods. These indirect methods usually reduce the need and help relieve the tension created by this unmet need. This means that although the need is still present, its intensity decreases significantly. The main form of indirect methods used to reduce the need is defense mechanisms, which are unconscious acts that help a person deal with an unpleasant situation or a socially unacceptable behavior or urge that they have. Defense mechanisms include, but are not limited to, rationalization, projection, displacement, compensation, daydreaming, repression, suppression, regression, denial, withdrawal, reaction formation, and sublimation. In the next slides, we will be talking more in detail into each one. Comes rationalization. This involves using a reasonable excuse or acceptable explanation for a behavior to avoid the real reason or true motivation. An example could be a patient who is really afraid of injections, might be afraid of doing some type of blood test, and thus he tells the doctor that he cannot take time off his job. In reality, this person is afraid of this injection, but he is trying to rationalize by using his job as an excuse to get out of this undesirable situation. Defense mechanism is projection. Projection involves placing the blame for someone's own actions and inadequacies on someone else or on circumstances rather than accepting the responsibility for their actions. An example could be a student might blame a poor exam score on the instructor rather than their own lack of preparation. So always trying to push the blame to someone else instead of the next defense mechanism is a little more familiar, which is called displacement. Displacement involves transferring feelings about one person to someone else. This normally happens when someone cannot direct their feelings to the person responsible for it, such as your parents or your boss. An example could be you're angry because your parents decided not to give you the monthly allowance because you have failed your test. So you start shouting at your smaller brother because you cannot shout at your parents. An example here could be the father who is shouting at his younger daughter. The younger daughter then releases her own anger at her younger brother, and then the younger brother releases his anger on his small toy. The next defense mechanism we'll be talking about is compensation. Compensation involves the substitution of one goal for another goal to achieve success. It can be a healthy defense mechanism if you achieve that alternate goal, and that alternate goal still has to meet your needs. For example, if you had a goal of becoming a doctor one day, but you could not afford the fees to enter into medical school, then you can have an alternate goal to become a physician's assistant, where you still achieve happiness because you're still working in the field that you like. The next defense mechanism we'll be speaking about is daydreaming. Daydreaming is a dreamlike thought process that occurs while the person is awake and provides means of mental escape when the person isn't satisfied in the reality he is living in. In this example, I will state how it could be positive and negative. So if a person daydreams that he is at the top of his class, he could capitalize on his chance and on this motivation and make this defense mechanism a positive defense mechanism by starting to work hard to achieve this outcome. But if he does not work hard to achieve this outcome, then it is simply just a defense mechanism which helps him escape temporarily from reality. The next defense mechanism is repression. This defense mechanism was first theorized by Sigmund Freud, one of the biggest psychologists that talked about the unconscious. Repression is the transfer of unacceptable or painful ideas, feelings, and thoughts into the unconscious. An example could be someone who might have had a trauma of falling from a high elevation, which happened in their childhood, and they do not even have a remembrance of this. But nonetheless, they are still terrified of heights. This has happened because the event is still in their unconscious mind and in their brain, and their brain has repressed it from reaching into their conscious mind, which still causes them to fear heights without knowing why they fear it. The next defense mechanism we'll be speaking about is suppression. Suppression occurs when someone is aware of this unacceptable behavior or situation he is in, but still chooses not to deal with it consciously. An example could be a woman ignoring a lump in her breast and beginning to work overtime just to make herself forget it, instead of getting screened for breast cancer possibly. The difference between repression and suppression is that for suppression, you are conscious of the situation you are in or the fear that you have. While in repression, it is something that your brain has hid from you back into the unconscious. The next defense mechanism is regression. This involves retreating to a previous developmental level that provides a person with more safety and security than the current level an individual is experiencing. An example could be an adult in the adult developmental level, facing stress of some kind of surgery that he may be going through later that day. This adult, though he is an adult, begins biting his fingernails and sucking on his thumb, something that a child would do. This is how this adult has regressed to a previous developmental level where he finds more safety and security than the level he is currently in. Perhaps the most popular of all defense mechanisms is denial. This involves a person disbelieving in an idea or an event that is too frightening or shocking for him to cope with. An example could be people with terminal illnesses, which are sometimes told how much estimated time they have until the end of their lives. In these situations, they would go into 5 stages of grief. The first one being denial, in which they deny the diagnosis and seek diagnosis from another doctor. Now, withdrawal is another stage that a lot of people go through. It is in which people just want to be left alone without all this tension that is happening Withdrawal can happen in two different ways. Either the person would cease to communicate, or they would remove themselves physically from the situation. An example could be when you are having trouble with a certain course or subject. Instead of working on yourself to get better at this subject, you simply just drop the course. Basically, just physically removing yourself from this situation or this class. The next defense mechanism is reaction formation. Reaction formation happens when your brain tries to defend itself against anxiety producing thoughts or impulses by transforming these unacceptable urges into a rather acceptable and rather good urges. An example could be a person with an unacceptable urge to burn things may want to become a firefighter, which is the exact opposite. Sublimation is the final defense mechanism I'll be talking about in this presentation. Sublimation occurs when a person redirects an unacceptable urge that they have into something of social value. An example could be a person with an unacceptable urge to fight and punch people in the face. This person transforms this urge into something that is acceptable and within the rules of a sport, such as becoming a mixed martial arts fighter. Now, the difference between reaction formation and sublimation is that for reaction formation, you are changing this desire of this unacceptable urge into its opposite, while for sublimation, you are just expressing your unacceptable desire in something of social value within some rules, such as becoming a fighter in the mixed martial arts, which is part of a sport. These are the references that I have used for my presentation, and thank you all for watching and listening.